Welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast, where we explore the connection between nutrition, performance, and health for busy, active people. I'm Claire Shorenstein, a sports dietitian and endurance athlete, and in every episode, I share evidence-based guidance, inspiring athlete stories, and practical tips on a wide variety of nutrition topics so that you can feel better, crush your endurance goals, and thrive as a human being. Today, I am chatting with Joe Corcione, an ultra running coach, an athlete, and the CEO of Everyday Ultra. He's a top 10 finisher at both the Javelina 100 and Tahoe 200, host of the Everyday Ultra podcast, where I recently was on there. I believe it was late November. And he's also the founder of the Desert Peak Ultra. What makes Joe's story stand out is where he started. From drug addiction and no athletic background to finishing over 25 ultras and helping ultra runners achieve their goals. And of course, since this is an athlete nutrition profile, you know we get into his entire journey. His main core belief is that you can become anyone you want if you're willing to learn and put in the work. And he is putting in the work right now. After we recorded this interview, he found out that he is going to Western States in 2026. So that is super duper excited. Before we dive in, I know many of you have some big goals for 2026 as well, and I would absolutely love to support you. I accept new one-to-one clients on a rolling basis into my 3 and 6 month one-to-one coaching programs. If you are curious what working with me actually looks like, what my process is, who I work with, all the logistics, and what types of transformations I see in my clients, go to my recent bonus episode on what it's actually like to work with a sports dietitian. I cover everything you've ever wanted to know in that episode, and I also give you a behind the scenes look into my monthly membership, Fuel for Life Crew, in case you don't want or need one-to-one coaching. If you're interested in working together, head on over to eatforendurance.com for all the details. All right, here's my chat with ultra runner and coach Joe Corcione. Well, Joe, welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. How's your day going so far?
Going great. Super excited to be here. We had you on our podcast just recently as well, too.
Yes.
So it is awesome to be on the other side, and I'm super honored and excited to dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you run today, or what did you get up to so far?
I did. I'm slowly easing back to it. I've taken probably the longest off season I've ever taken, which has kind of been nice. And I think it was, I always tell my athletes anytime we're working with them that when the body tells you at some point that you need some rest, you have to honor it. And after my last race, it was super clear that we needed some rest after a long season. So as much as I wanted to run and as much as it would have been awesome just to get back and train, I've taken, 2 months to just really do not much running and just starting to ease back into it this week as it's feeling exciting. So it's super good. It's actually been so rainy here in Phoenix, which is very uncharacteristic. So perfect timing to get out running here too. But yeah, it's been good so far getting back to it.
Nice. And just for my listeners, what race did you recently do?
Yeah, so I did the Kodiak 100 miler in Big Bear, California, just outside of LA. Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty big year. I did Black Canyon 100K and 50K, both them back to back. Then Arizona Monster 300, which I unfortunately had to DNF due to an injury, but made it 200 miles, so still ran 200.
Just 200 miles.
Just 200, right? Then Tahoe 200, and then Kodiak. And so it was a pretty big season. And yeah, I mean, even though I guess I don't want to say only 100 miles, but even though it was shorter than the other two, I mean, it was still 100 miles and definitely was a little tired during that one, but it was still good then nonetheless.
Yeah, that's quite the year. I'd say you definitely deserve some off-season time to chill.
Thank you. My body agrees with that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I like to start these interviews by digging into your nutrition roots, as I say. So I'd love to just hear, what kinds of memories you have about food and meal times from when you were growing up.
Yeah, for sure. So I was probably the poster child for the standard kid diet growing up. I mean, I would have, the typical cereal every morning of, Fruit Loops, Frosted Flakes, any of that stuff. Usually would have school lunch. And then at dinner, my mom would cook dinner. And then I would usually always have dessert after, whether it be cookie, cake, ice cream, anything as such too. Now, I wasn't necessarily an active kid at all. I was a video game kid. And not just because I love video games, and I still like video games to this day, but it was more from a standpoint of I wasn't athletic growing up, and I was in this belief that if you're born a certain way, you're always going to be that way. And so I figured, I wasn't born athletic, so I might as well just not go for it. So I just pretty much played video games when I was home from school and ate like crap all day. That was just kind of it. And I never really saw food as kind of, I don't know, comfort or anything as such too. It was also really hard for me growing up, and this kind of plays to the story and how kind of my whole whole nutrition evolution kind of changed. But when I was in first grade, I was prescribed Adderall because I was diagnosed with ADHD. And for those who have taken Adderall before, it extremely curbs your appetite. So I didn't really eat a lot growing up because I was super skinny, really frail, probably not a healthy weight. I mean, we never really got that checked, but I mean, I was very, very, very skinny. So from that standpoint, like I didn't really eat much because of that. I almost saw food as kind of just like, I don't know, it's just something that we do. And that was kind of the relationship with it. Like fast forward into college and stuff, I'm still taking Adderall, but now I'm using a lot more harder drugs and drinking a lot more. Probably a lot of my calories came from alcohol and ended up actually gaining like, the classic college 15 and ended up gaining more weight and everything too. But, after college is kind of when I needed to look in the mirror and look at my whole life because I was using drugs. I was addicted to Adderall and using a lot of cocaine and all this kind of stuff. And, was in a place where, I'd left a job on Wall Street and moved back in with my parents. And I was just really unhappy with myself. I could tell I was super unhealthy because I was using drugs throughout the workday just to like feel better about myself. This is where I actually started to run. But what's really interesting, I started to run because that was the thing that when I looked up how to get sober, because that was the first thing I knew I needed to fix, exercise was such a common element. And I talk about that a lot in my story with the podcast, because obviously we're an ultrarunning podcast and everything.
Yeah.
One thing that I haven't talked about a ton, which was like a huge part of the journey, was another part of the things that helped to get sober was actually fixing your diet. And so that's when I really went on this journey of like self-exploration and finding different foods and knowing that like what you eat literally determines your brain chemistry, how you feel, your energy levels. And for me, I knew that if I needed to operate sober in day-to-day life, like I just needed to feel good from a health perspective. And so that kind of kickstarted a lot of things. So, just as equal as running kind of changed my life and helped me get sober, like really the whole nutritional journey helped me to do that as well too. And it's still a kind of big part of my day-to-day and training and everything too.
Yeah. I want to back up for a minute because you've spoken about being unathletic or not being interested in sports. And I think there's so much to like, I can really relate to that because I also grew up telling myself I'm not an athletic person. I never considered myself, I was always a musician and more into the arts or whatever. And, so we have these things that like you enjoyed your video games. And I've heard you talk about other podcasts kind of being picked last. And, so there's like the social implications of that. But it's so interesting, like these stories we kind of tell ourselves. And it's kind of interesting. It's like, does it make it so that we don't even try? Is it like I feel like sometimes when you kind of paint this picture of yourself as, oh, I'm not this athletic person, maybe you're not naturally, whether it's you're not placed in an athletic environment because maybe your parents didn't think to do that, or you didn't express interest, or you just don't believe you're good at it, or it's not this natural talent that other people have. But it's just such this interesting thing to me because it almost seems like a little bit of a vicious cycle because, okay, you tell yourself you're unathletic, however that came about, and then you just don't try, you don't believe in yourself, you don't even like know if you're interested or not. And I know for me and how I ended up getting into running, it was like just some random someone basically just dragged me into doing some cross-country running stuff. But it's a story I also told myself for a very long time until I eventually got into it. So I'm kind of curious for you what that was like, just that whole not thinking of yourself as an athletic person.
Yeah, for sure. And, that is one of the things I think that holds people back in life in general is the stories that we tell ourselves. And of course, this isn't something that I knew at the time, but as I started to look deeper into how the brain works and how kids develop and, what determines how we look at the world, it all comes down to our belief systems. And our belief systems are not just, they're not religious, everything, right? Those are one form of belief systems. But another form of belief system is how you view the world, how you view yourself, how you view other people, right? Like these are the lens at which you look at the world. And these beliefs will shape your actions. It will shape how you feel. It will shape how you react to things. They're the most powerful driving force in your entire life. And usually these beliefs are fed through repetition or also extremely emotional events, like especially when you're younger. And because they actually develop like literal neural pathways in your mind. Like if you look in your mind, like your beliefs are actually a physical like formation of little neurons like matched together. And the stronger those beliefs are, the more that they become overpowering. That's why a lot of times it's hard to change habits, because usually habits are linked to some sort of a belief or something. And that is such like a hard wiring thing. It's fixable. That's the most positive thing. It's fixable. And obviously we can talk about that too. But to go back to your question, like when I was a kid, right, like there were all these instances that fed this belief. So I remember my parents signed me up for soccer, and I went for soccer, and I stunk at it. I was bad. And they were like, oh gosh, this wasn't for me. So then, that like fed the belief, oh, I'm not good at soccer. Then I signed up for baseball, and like I was always like yelled at because I like the ball would come to me and it would go right through my legs. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then that fed into the belief, like, oh, you're not good at baseball. Then I would go into like recess and I would get picked on for the kids because they would throw a football at me. And then it led me to get picked all the time last in pickup games, as you mentioned. So all of these things over and over again, like fed the belief that I'm not athletic. And so that over time is like the story that I kept telling myself over and over and over again. Now, what's really interesting too is that, kind of the other layer onto that, because beliefs kind of have layers, is, growing up, I mean, I was told in first grade, it's like, hey, like you have ADHD, your brain works differently, and this is the way that it is. And I would always get in trouble in school because I'd be rambunctious and everything. And basically, my teacher would call my parents and then just be like, hey, like, there is something wrong with him and everything. And so that fed the belief that there is something wrong with me. But all of these things, right? Like, and whether it was different associations through different things or however it was too, and society, I mean, I think like society also perpetuates this because like we're expected to pick like our major when we're 18, which is like crazy, right? Like
ridiculous.
so crazy. But, and that's not a knock on like the system or anything, but the point is this, is that the overarching belief of like where this all stemmed from is that I believe that you were either born a certain way or not, and that your skills, abilities, traits, characteristics are a fixed thing inside of you, and you can't change that no matter what. So it's either you're athletic or not. You're either confident or you're not. You're either good at science or you're not, right? And so all those things like was like, oh, I'm not good at athletics, so I can't do that. I can't operate in the normal day to day without taking Adderall, then so be it. And that was the fixed mindset that I had, and that led me to not pursue, big goals. It led me to, whenever anything got hard or like I stunk at something, I never pursued it, like because I was like, why even bother? Because I'm not going to get better. And that leads to a really, really suboptimal life just in terms of how you feel. Because like think about that just from a logical perspective. If you believe that you are the way that you are, like you can't get better at things, like that stinks. It's like you are belayed into the roulette of life, and we always are, right? Like some people are born into better situations than others and all that kind of stuff too. But regardless of all that, if you have the belief that you can't change like who you are, like, and you have something that really stinks or just just doesn't fit into the lifestyle you want, like that's hard. And I had to live with that for many, many years. And that was kind of the whole crux when I started to go through everything of like, why do I take drugs? Like, why do I do all these things? It was because I had that belief that I had this fixed mindset and who I was going to be. And then once I developed, and, there's a whole, obviously like deep path into it too, but like a growth mindset that you can get better, you can push yourself. Humans are meant to adapt. You can become anyone who you want to become as long as you're willing to learn and put in the work. Like once I understood that, then everything became possible of transforming myself into this person who could run ultramarathons, be sober, all those things. But I always say like, you can't become that person who you want to become, whether it is that or something else, without the belief that you can. Yeah. That's kind of the whole background onto that. So I know it was absolutely spiraled, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be such an interesting and beneficial exercise for anyone listening, because I think all of us have told ourselves stories about ourselves at one point or another, just to kind of think about like, yeah, I mean, you can kind of pull the thread on something, and you can think about, what have I been telling myself that might not be true? Or what have I told myself in the past that led me to miss certain opportunities or to whatever, And I mean, I can even think back when I was in early elementary school, and I think certain things happened, but it led me to the belief that I am not good at math. And it's funny. So I have a third grader right now, and she wrote on her own little self-assessment, because we just had parent teacher conferences. And she said, I'm not very good at math. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And it really like triggered me a little bit, because I'm like, wait a minute. Because I had just talked to her teacher. She's great at math. It's just, she's not as strong. It's harder for her than other subjects. And so, kind of like what you're saying is like, if you can put in the work and do something, it's like, do you want to do these things? Do you want to be better? It's just so much more complicated. And so, yeah, I think we're all kind of doing ourselves a bit of a disservice when we're just kind of saying, oh, I can't do this, or I'm not good at this, or whatever it may be. And, yes, obviously there are some things we may not be able to do, but it doesn't mean we can't try certain things. And, whether you're a back of the packer, like you don't have to be winning the events or whatever. Like you can also just do events and enjoy them. Yeah, I think there's a lot to explore there. And if anyone feels inspired who's listening, who wants to kind of explore that themselves, I think that's a good exercise.
Yeah, 100%. And, this is obviously like a podcast about like nutrition and food and things like that too. Like, I'm sure you know this too. Like, there's a lot of beliefs that people have about food and like how, and that can lead to, or even just habits around food, right? We talked about this on our podcast, how you were mentioning that example of someone who, mentioned that like, they don't have 5 minutes in the day to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Like, is that actually true or is that a belief? Like, is it the belief that you don't have free time or is that actual reality? Like, and there's obviously like all other kind of outlets, but like I feel like food is also one thing where people can have certain beliefs, and my beliefs about food have changed over time and time again, radically, from year after year. And I think that's another big thing. Like even just if you're having a bad relationship with food, it's also like challenging those beliefs and looking at them, and obviously getting help to help to get you out of there. But like those are things where there's can be a lot of strong beliefs associated with it as well.
And a lot of it is, especially if you're a parent or caregiver, like this person I had been mentioning was on your podcast, like it's almost this belief of like I'm not as deserving of caring for myself, like I need to do everything for others and I'm not going to do that for myself, or telling yourself like I don't have time to do XYZ for myself. And it's like, well, but what else are you doing? And so it's not only like a time management problem, but it's also a priorities issue, because the thing that I always run into with people is you're making time for exercise and you're not giving yourself what you need on the fueling front. And you have to do both. And so that's always a kind of like, you can't like, those things have to be equal order in terms of the priority list, right? Switching gears for a minute, I'd love to kind of go into your journey to getting sober. You talked about kind of the role of nutrition, and, I've heard you talk about your story a bit on other podcasts. And one thing that stood out to me was, it's not this big radical change. Like, yes, and like you kind of went cold turkey. So in many, or actually, no, you didn't end up. You tried and that kind of failed. But what stood out to me is you were talking about kind of these small changes leading up to big change. And that's so much of what I do in the nutrition work, I do with clients and others. It's all about like, if you want something to be sustainable, it's all about finding these small little things that feel possible in this exact moment, and then kind of building and building and building on that. And then eventually it's like, oh my God, look at what you've accomplished. Like that's huge. So, but yeah, I'd like to kind of hear you talk a little bit about how you were able to kind of get sober. I know we kind of skipped over how the drugs and alcohol kind of enter the picture to begin with. And so feel free to share whatever you want there. But
yeah, no, and I think it's really interesting because this might be a really hot take. Like, I think it's cool when people share their stories about like the bad stuff that they did and everything like that too. It's not that I don't like to talk about those things, but I think the most impactful part's the transformation, right? Like, and that's just my opinion. So like, I think we could make this like a hour-long podcast of me talking about all the crap that I did wrong. But I always like to talk about like, what are the things that like we're in that transformation period. And that's why I always like to do it. And I even like to speak less about like now, because I always think that, anytime we listen to podcasts or information, it's always so cool to like see where people were on their journeys, at least from my perspective. And so I love that you're asking this question, because this is the heart of what I enjoy to talk about the most. And I think is like the most useful. So I appreciate that a ton. So yeah, I guess the journey to getting sober, and I'll give like a key focus on like the food aspect and the nutrition aspect. Actually, I don't think I've ever really shared this on a podcast, which is interesting. So at the time, the first thing that I did before I even looked into nutrition, everything was just start running. And so again, like the reason why I chose running was because I saw that exercise was something that makes you healthy. That was something I was not willing to do in a gym in a public setting, because again, I had this belief system that it was like, oh man, you're not athletic. So I was like, okay, if I run and I wake up at 5 a.m. and it's dark, no one's going to see me. Like no one can laugh at me, like whatever, I'm just going to go out and do it. And I went out for my first like quarter-mile run. I actually planned to go for a mile, only made it a quarter mile. I was breathing super heavy. My legs hurt. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. But something in it that day was just like, okay, just go back out one more time. Like, why not? And ended up going a little bit further the next day, and further and further and further. And that started to build. Now, as that was building, like what that was doing. So as I mentioned before, when you have beliefs, like that beliefs can either be formed by like a really emotional event, right? Like something, on the very unfortunate side, right? Like trauma is like one of those things that does form these really negative beliefs because there's just such impactful, like emotional experiences, or it's repetition over time. And so like what would happen was like I would see my runs get more and more and more, and that was starting to build the belief subconsciously at the time because I didn't really fully comprehend this until like I started reading books and like understanding psychology more. But what that was doing was starting to unlock more of a belief that, oh, if I just keep showing up and I keep getting better, like I can get better, I can improve, like I can learn and kind of go these things. And so that allowed me to want to make other changes, which that led to the nutrition piece. Cause I was like, okay, let me focus on one thing at a time. I'm going to focus on the exercise piece. And then while I had like a good routine onto that, I was like, all right, let me look at the nutrition side. Now, I'm going to say this. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a dietitian. I'm not an expert. And I was far from an expert at this time.
Yeah.
But at the time, the big thing, like at this time specifically, the big thing was the paleo diet and the keto diet. Like those were the biggest things. And whatever areas of the internet that I found, that was the thing that was saying like, if you have problem regulating your blood sugar, which is one of the reasons why you have energy spikes with ADHD, doing these diets are going to help. Now, clearly,
False.
it's 100% false. I don't agree to it. I'm not on those diets now. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was like, all right, this makes sense. Let's go for it. So I actually did start with the keto diet because I was like, oh, like this seems compelling. It seems like it works.
Was that pretty early on? Because like I imagine too, because you mentioned before that you weren't eating very much. Yeah. And so like if you're running and you're struggling with running, I imagine it was even harder because you weren't eating very much. And then of course you add like a low carb diet to it. So that must have been tricky.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, so it was really interesting because when I did that, I mean, I got like the keto flu and I read about this. So I was like, okay, like, it's normal, whatever. And I was keeping my running pretty stable at this time. So I wasn't really building everything. I was just kind of in the space. But it was really interesting is like the first like 2 to 3 weeks, I actually felt like really focused, like mentally felt good. Now, here's the thing with diets all the time, right? It's like, I don't think it was because I was on the keto diet. I just think it was because I just cut out a significant amount of sugar because I was eating like crap. And so like a lot of times with diets, like, where I kind of see stuff, it's like, it's not necessarily like, might not always be the diet that's actually helping you out. It's cutting out the other things.
It's the rules because you're suddenly imposing tons of rules on yourself that usually restrict lots of ultra processed foods.
Correct. So I think that's really what was happening, like helping me at the time, like not necessarily keto diet, but I was like hooked and I was like, oh, like this is it. This is the answer. Like I feel so much good. And I was taking less drugs, less Adderall, was functioning better. But then what happened was I started to get ambitious and I signed up for a race and I knew I needed to build up volume. And as I started building up volume, I actually like would feel like crap. Like I would run, I would come back and I would feel so tired. I'd feel so achy. I'm like, what the heck is going on?
How much were you running at this point?
Oh, I was running probably like 3 to 4 miles a day, which I mean, isn't that much, like 5 days a week, like not that much, but my long runs, this is where I started to notice the most. Like once I started getting like 6 miles at the time, that was my long run, 6 miles, 8 miles, which by the way, that's a reminder. Like I ran 200 miles, but at one point, 6 miles was my long run. So that, please take that in.
We've all been there. We've all been there. I mean, one lap around the track used to kill me when I was just starting out. So everyone starts from zero.
100%. So I mean, once I started getting the long runs, that's where I really started noticing. I actually passed out in the middle of a run once. Like I literally felt sick to my stomach and was just like felt woozy. And then I like woke up and I was on the side of the trail and I was like, whoa, like what the heck happened? And then I went to the doctor because I didn't attribute it to the diet. I just thought like something was wrong with me. I was like, oh my God, do I have cancer? Like, am I dying? Like, what the hell? Because I can be a little bit of a hypochondriac, I'm not gonna lie. So I go to the doctor and, thankfully this doctor at the time, they're like, well, like, you're running a lot more. Like, how many carbs are you eating? And I was like, oh, I'm not eating like none. And they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, like I'm eating no carbohydrates. And they're like, you need carbohydrates to run and to fuel your body. Like that's what your body is craving out there. And that's why you're passing out. And I was like, I tried to like spit out all of my, keyboard nutritionist things I was. At the time, I was just like an ignorant person. All that being said, thankfully, this doctor was like, no, you need carbs because you need to fill glycogen. It helps to burn energy. Like gave me the whole rundown, thankfully. This doctor was a runner too. So like, thank goodness, because that changed everything. Now, at the time though, I was still like so hell bent on like those fad diets. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to go into paleo, which
next step up.
It was the next step up. And, I started adding in like sweet potatoes and, more like carbs that were like not processed and whatever, like the ones that were under the diet as well too. And I started to feel better and started to feel really good. But this is actually the part where it started to feel like I'd never felt this before. Because again, like I didn't really have a big relationship with food growing up from this standpoint, but I would go to different social gatherings and they'd have like a really big chocolate cake. And I was like, nope, I'm not going to eat that. And that like built this, and I didn't really notice at the time, but like a subconscious like disdain for food. And I was like, oh man, like, because there was almost like a part where I was like, no, I like hanging out with friends. I like to eat chocolate cake. I like to eat candy every once in a while, like all this kind of stuff. It started to be something that like led me to feel like I was living like a suboptimal life. Now, I felt conflicted though, because I was like, oh, I'm reading all these things about, oh man, like in order to get clean, like you have to eat clean. And like, I was like, but I also like want to do all this stuff and everything. And it was a really big kind of conflict journey. And then like kind of down the line, it was so funny. I ran my first ultra marathon. And by the way, like I did my first ultra marathon on paleo and everything like that too, and all that stuff.
Using sports nutrition? Or were
So
those not
yeah,
allowed?
yeah, no, I did. So that was the one thing because like over time, like someone was like, "Oh, you should be eating out
Yeah.
there." All I ate, like literally, my first ultra was like Cliff Blocks. Like that was it. That was all I did. It was first of all, I did a 50K. It took me 11 hours. I was chasing
Oh
clock,
God.
crazy. But I had a Cliff Blocks the entire time. I cannot eat one of those nowadays. Like that race really
Yeah.
addictive.
That
But all that
probably
being
ruined
said,
it.
I was like, you know what? Like I will give myself a little bit of leeway on this and do well. And it was interesting because this kind of led where it came full circle. Once I realized that, I was like, oh, I'm eating this stuff. This stuff is super processed. This stuff is something that, you know, from the whatever the paleo gods or whatever would be shunned upon, it was making me feel good. It was making me feel better. It was making me perform. And then I started to realize, like after that ultra marathon, I was like, wait a second. Even at the ultra marathon, I would see people just slamming Coca-Cola and like eating candy. And I was like, what the heck is this? Like I was like stunned. I like couldn't believe it. I was like, these are athletes? I was like, what is going on? And a very judgmental thing for me to say at the time. But that's when I realized that it's like, oh, like you can perform well and you can enjoy some of your favorite foods as well. And that's, you know, where I started to do a little bit more research and realize that, you know, yes, like, you know, maybe you can be gung ho in those things, but if you do miss out on some of the things in life of like the enjoyment of, you know, having that scoop of ice cream or, you know, enjoying that like home cooked meal that doesn't like fit like your nutritional standards, but like it's a great way to have social stuff. Like at that time, I realized I was like, no, like those things are important to me. And as long as, you know, I can eat as clean, whatever the standards are on my thing, but not from a standpoint of like I have to and I feel like I need to, that's where I started to come from the point where it's like, you know what, like I'm willing to do this. Like I will eat these things if I want to eat them. Obviously, you know, for me, like I like to keep it in moderation. Like I kind of follow the 80-20 rule, but that's when I just realized at that point that, you know, I didn't want to restrict myself. And I don't necessarily restrict myself now, but I found that like being more free and open with my nutrition, like allows me to be in a position where not only like can I enjoy life more and, you know, enjoy like that amazing piece of dessert. And I also love to go to Disney World. And if like you go to Disney World and you can't eat desserts, like you're screwed. So all that being said, from that standpoint though, like I found that I actually performed better because I was able to fuel my body more. I was able to have a better relationship with food and I wasn't afraid to give my body the sustenance that it needs. And sometimes the reality is like, again, I'm not a nutritionist, so like don't listen. But like for me, what I found is that like if I'm putting in like, I mean, when I was training for Arizona Monster, I was putting in like 120, 130, 140 mile weeks, like a lot of volume. Sometimes like I felt that like having processed food just helped me to get to baseline, right? Like because I didn't want, you don't want to be in a
You
deficit
need it.
so
You
long.
can't like fuel ultra running without any, first of all, like when we say processed foods, like remembering there's a spectrum, there's actually a whole like formal classification system for processed foods. And it's like, unless you're having like a whole fruit or whatever, I mean, everything has some degree of processing. And really what most people are referring to is ultra processed foods,
Right.
But they have their time and place and they're important. I mean, even a flavored yogurt is a ultra processed food, like protein powder, that's an ultra processed food. Like there are a lot of things in that category that are helpful. And I think the other thing that people don't always consider, especially with things like sugar, is kind of the science behind it and how things work a little bit different with athletes because we are more insulin sensitive and things change physiologically and with how we process sugar when we exercise. And so our like how we handle it and what's considered safe or unsafe or whatever, you know, when we talk about sugar, because sugar is often talked about in such a, oh, sugar is bad kind of thing. But for athletes, it's a little bit different. And we have room for a lot more in our diet because we're using that for energy and to replace glycogen. So our needs for that is just, it's just so different. So it's really hard when we're talking about general population versus any kind of athlete, and particularly an endurance athlete. It's just really different with this stuff. So people forget.
Super different. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I just felt like even to eating that stuff, like from standpoint of just like making it better, like allowed me to be in a position where I just didn't feel like I needed to be this like restricted person because I made the choice like to go when I went sober and like through this journey, like I actually became sober 7 years ago from just like a couple weeks ago. And that was like the last time I did it. I hadn't run the 50K at the time. Like I did it while I was, on the paleo diet because I was, trying to like I was on there. So I don't think I could have done it like just going keto with running and stuff because where I started to really break through was like seeing, myself complete my first half marathon and my first 10K and everything like that too. And that like started to show like more belief in myself that like, oh, I can learn how to operate without taking Adderall. I can learn how to operate and be at a social function without having a drink. And that's like what helped me to get that belief. And even like from the perspective of like changing my nutritional habits, like that too also allowed because I was like, whoa, like I changed my nutritional habits and like I'm in an area where like I'm, taking control of my destiny essentially, like whether like not even just talking about food choices aside, but just more from the standpoint of understanding that it's, oh, all I need to do is just change my actions and change my beliefs. And if I do that, then I can get to where I need to be. And that all helped me to get to the point where I was sober in that too. And then later down the line, like once I, after my first 50K, which was the following year, is when I got to the point where I was like, okay, like now I'm going to start being more like holistic with what I'm eating and not being restrictive. And I think that has allowed me to stay on the path a lot more because I think like a lot of people, I know this from being in the, recovery community and everything, a lot of people do go back. And I think a lot of people do go back because they do take a very restrictive kind of mindset to it. Now, again, like there's kind of a balance. Like there's actually a pretty good book called like The Abstinence Myth by Adi Jaffe, which is a great book. It's awesome. I don't agree with it fully in the lens of it because, it does say like, oh, if you're like, you're an alcoholic, like you like sometimes cutting it out completely is a bad thing, which I disagree in some regards, but the standpoint that the book kind of goes to is like the more restrictive you are in your life, like the more you're going to feel constricted by it and the more you're going to want to basically try to go back because you're trying to chase that feeling. And it's like if you can find the feeling in other ways, like, and it doesn't have to, like, this is where I disagree with the book. Like, I don't think you necessarily need to have that one thing every once in a while. Like, for sobriety, for that's just personal choice for me. Like I choose to not do it, but like I find it in other things like running. And for me, like I said before, like I love theme parks. That's like one of my other passions. But hanging out with my wife.
That felt so random. You're like in Disney World. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, it is. It's extremely random.
That was so random.
It's so random. I don't talk about it a lot because obviously it's not like running adjacent, but like that's just one of the things I love. All that being said, though, I think you can learn to find things in other ways, and like your life doesn't have to be super full of like discipline and restrictive and everything. Which, by the way, like don't get me wrong, I'm not saying discipline's bad. I love David Goggins. I think he's awesome. I think he's great. I think though, in some certain regards, though, I think if we live our life all the time like that. And again, Goggins even says, this is how I live my life. You don't have to live it like that too. I've just found for me and for a lot of the athletes that I work with, like we also want to have some part of our life where we are having fun, we are enjoying it. And that just leads to a life that is going to be meaningful for us. Like we all have to decide like how much in life, like we want to, like, what do we want it to be? And what do we want to feel? And what do we want to do? And, some of those areas are going to be, maybe like quote unquote, less suboptimal from a certain standpoint. But at the same time, I truly believe that we don't have to sacrifice things like to like go from zero in order to enjoy a life. Like even from an ultra running perspective, I always tell people, I was like, you don't have to, never see your family and train for an ultra marathon. Like you can do both. Like you don't have to, get rid of that other hobby. Like, no, like, you can still do these things. Like, yes, you might need to make sacrifices here and there, but you don't need to sacrifice everything. And so I think from that standpoint, like, I know this is just getting completely like tangential and everything, but like my whole thing is like, you got to decide like, what are the most important things for you and then align your life towards that. And for me, like from the standpoint of nutrition, it was like, I still want to eat clean for whatever's clean for me and what works, but I also want to, enjoy the dessert every once in a while. I want to be able to, be in a position where I'm not going to beat myself up if I like throw down a whole frozen pizza after I ate a long run because it's good for me, right? Like, and that has been a choice that I think has been really, really monumental, and not just obviously my training and performance, but my lifestyle, sobriety, and overall just fulfillment in life.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this to you. I've interviewed several people who have also had, problems with substance abuse, whether it's alcohol, drugs, both. I've worked with a lot of clients who have had kind of histories like that as well. And it's really, everyone has a different journey, and it's really interesting to see kind of how they view nutrition, because I do see more tendencies to be very rigid or to kind of cling on to something else, because obviously, getting sober, I mean, it's really hard. And it's for many people like a daily struggle, or at least, for some of the people I've worked with. And so, yeah, it is often easier for these people. I mean, for anyone, but particularly for these people that I've worked with and that I've interviewed, to kind of cling to these rules, right? I can't eat this, I can't eat that. Like, this is how I stay on the path. And unfortunately, when it comes to the world of like nutrition, and if we're trying to maintain a sustainable and healthy way of eating, like, we live in the messy gray area, that in between. And I said on my podcast many times before, like, I hate the term clean eating, because it's just not, people use it because it's so normalized. So this isn't a judgment on you or anything, but I don't like to use that terminology, because like, eating isn't dirty or clean. It's just, you eat. Yeah, it is often hard for most people to kind of navigate the nuances of nutrition, because it never is like, you can't eat this, you can't eat that. Like, we are trying to include, whatever makes sense for you, whatever you enjoy. And obviously things will shift depending on what's going on in your life. One thing that comes up a lot in this population in particular, and I'm sure as a coach, you've seen this, so I'd love to get your point of view on this as well, is exercise dependence, and kind of this, the connection between like addiction and substance abuse and exercise, whether that's ultramarathon or a different type of endurance activity. But we do see it a lot in ultras, I think, that, or even like, not even necessarily like, sobriety, but for some people it's depression, anxiety, mental health struggles, and those often go hand in hand, sometimes with obviously struggles with alcohol and drugs and all of that. And so we see the use of exercise to cope, which totally understand, and exercise is wonderful. But obviously there is a healthy relationship with exercise and a not so healthy one. This is where Goggins, for me personally, I know for many others, like, I think, like, I've read all his books. He's incredibly inspiring, and how he transformed his life. But like, it's not a healthy relationship with exercise when you're like running on a broken foot. Like, that's not something that that's a huge red flag. Or if you're never taking a rest day ever and you're not listening to your body, those are such massive red flags to me. So like, I think this is an interesting thing that maybe we can explore together. I attended a really great talk by Leslie Schilling, who's going to be on my podcast soon. She's a dietitian. She specializes in eating disorders. And what she was saying was like, if you feel it, you can do it. So there's, obviously this whole thing of like, okay, well, there's nothing wrong with running 100, 200 miles, 300 miles, whatever you want to do, run a marathon, whatever it is. If you feel it, you can do it. But then we do have to evaluate, well, how are you approaching exercise, and how are you treating your body when it's giving you really clear signals that you should not keep going, or, so yeah, I'm curious kind of how you think of this as a coach, what you've experienced personally, if you've struggled with this.
Yeah, I'll go through kind of like how I experienced this first, and then because I see this in athletes so commonly. And usually the biggest red flag for me is like, if an athlete either puts in like a big training week, or maybe they're showing signs that their body's like, okay, it's time for some recovery or anything, and I give a rest day or I give a recovery week, and they will come back to me being like, what? Like, I need to be doing more. Or if I look in Training Peaks and they're just like going way over what's prescribed, that's where these things start to come apparent. And it's one of the most important conversations. It's the hardest conversations that I can have. And, I encourage anyone listening, like, if you fall into this umbrella, like, first of all, just know you're not alone. It's a very common thing. And I've been through the same thing. But number two, this is one of the most important things anyone can make in their life if they feel like they are dependent on exercise. So going back to wee little sober me, who's new in my sobriety, right? I was at a part where I was like, oh my gosh, I've done it. Like, I'm sober. Like, this is amazing. Like, I ran an ultra marathon. Like, holy crap. I was like so freaking stoked. And this was actually like right after the 50K. It was like right after the 50K. At that time, I was like fired up. I knew I wanted to sign up for 50 miler. So like, I signed up for a 50 miler, and I went like right back into it after the 50K, because at that point I was like, all right, like, we might as well just get back into it. And as I was running out there in that first run back, I'm running, first mile's great, second mile's great, and all of a sudden I just feel a super sharp pain in the side of my knee, and I was like, whoa.
Oh no.
I was like, this is kind of weird. And I was like, all right, let me try to push through it a bit. And I tried to push through, and it was just agonizing to run through. And I was like, okay, like maybe I just need to like rest it off, whatever, try back the next day. And then I woke up the next day. I was like, all right, here we go. First half mile, like nothing. I was like, oh, great. We're back, baby. Like, let's go do this. We're going to train for this mile. We're going to crush. It's going to be awesome. And then all of a sudden, bam, it comes back even worse than it was yesterday. And I was like, oh, damn. Okay, I think something's wrong. So again, hypochondriac me goes to the doctor, get scans, tests, all that kind of stuff, right?
That's better than you not going to the doctor.
Yeah, for me, I'm definitely not a person who's like afraid to
doctor
go to the
avoidant.
doctor. Yeah, like I will go. That's just me personally. So at the same time, I go there. I think like my legs like broken. Oh my god, it's done. And it just turns out to be classic IT band syndrome, one of the most common running things. And what had happened was, I mean, it was so bad to the point that like I couldn't even run more than a mile, which is a very severe IT band syndrome. And so I wasn't running as much. And all of a sudden, like I started to feel way depressed. I started to feel like I didn't know who I was. I started to like get these like same feelings of like hopelessness that I had before. And I was like, whoa, like this actually feels eerily similar. This feels eerily similar to the moments when I was using drugs and I wasn't on drugs and I needed to go back. And I was like, what is going on here? And that's when I made the realization that it's like, oh my gosh, like I am addicted to running, and I basically swapped out the stuff. Now, that's very, very common in people who go into recovery. They're addicted to one thing. They have addicted personalities, which by the way, I'm going to say this. I hate that statement. I hate when people say I have an addictive personality. You know why?
Yeah.
That is a belief that you are giving to yourself. Like labels, like anything like that. And this is going to be very contradicted. This is going to, or controversial, I should say. So any flack you get, just like come right to me for this. And I can say this because I'm in recovery. I hate the notion when people say like I am always an addict even when I'm sober. That is terrible. That is awful. I get why people say it. I get it 100%. But at the same time, you are perpetuating the narrative that you are always an addict. And that is the story you're telling yourself. That is a story. There is no fact behind that. Like, so from the standpoint, it's like, I don't go by that. Like, I don't say like, oh, I'm a recovering addict. It's like, no, I'm sober. Like that's what I am. Right. I don't say I'm in recovery. I don't say those things. Like, yeah, sometimes if I'm in a group and like, that's like the term, I don't want to like, make people upset or like challenge it.
Yeah.
But like, the reality is like, that's a story. So again, like when people are like, I have an addictive
that makes sense to me.
Yeah. When people are like, I have an addictive personality, I can't help it. It's like, yes, you can. That's an excuse. Like, stop trying to like put this excuse that you have an addictive personality and that you're hopelessly doomed to always be addicted to something. It's like, no, like you can change. So anyways, that was my big thing.
And people use that with food too. They're like, oh, I'm addicted to sugar. I'm addicted to sweets. I'm like, no, you're not. Like 100%. You just have a really complex relationship to food that we need to dig into and work through, and we'll figure it out. So yeah. And also what you're describing with kind of swapping one thing for another. I mean, I don't have a history with like drug or alcohol abuse, but I very much switched identities from being, I identified as a musician, and suddenly then I was a runner, and then I just threw my entire personality into it. Like when your entire personality becomes your sport, like that's not really a good thing. You really want to make sure that I always tell my clients, like, have a variety of hobbies. Like maybe, yes, sport is like the main one, but have a bunch of things that you enjoy. Yes. And it might not be the same, but there will be off seasons. There will be times where you can't run for whatever reason, life or injury or sickness or whatever. And you have to have other things you can do. You can't always be dependent on this one thing. So yeah, but I have been there. I totally feel you. I had those depressing thoughts, like, because I was injured, and so I can relate to all that. I want to take a quick break to tell you about my virtual private practice, Eat for Endurance, and everything I have to offer. It's January, and I know this is a busy month for you all, and it's usually very busy because you've set some big goals for yourself, often related to nutrition, health, and fitness, and I am here to help. If you haven't checked out my website, eatforendurance.com, I have so many free and low-cost resources to support you with whatever you're working on. Maybe you want to learn more about how to adjust your fueling during the winter, or what to eat before that long or short training session, or how to tell if you're eating enough as a busy, active person each or every day, or how to address hydration. I mean, I have resources, especially free ones, on so many different topics. So if you haven't checked that out yet, you are missing out. You can literally pause this and go check them out right now at eatforendurance.com. I also have low-cost mini guides, and I have masterclasses on a wide range of everyday and sports nutrition topics, whether it's, everyday eating, micronutrients. I do one on supplements. I have body image, travel nutrition, off-season fueling. I have so much stuff. I'm not even listing all of them. So you guys can go over and check those things out. You get actually all of those resources if you sign up for my membership, Fuel for Life Crew, which is just $39 a month, no commitment. You can do it for a month and then leave if it's not for you. But the wonderful thing about the membership is it's essentially small group coaching. You get all those resources and you get to watch them and then pop into our private Slack channel and just literally ask me whatever is on your mind nutrition-wise. So you can clarify things if it wasn't clear to you. We can help individualize stuff. You can connect with other members. We have some really wonderful members in there. And you can attend other live monthly calls. So it's a really great deal. I would love for you to join us. We have a really fun community right now. So you can get all that stuff at eatforendurance.com, where you can grab your free downloads, explore my low-cost resources, sign up for my membership, and of course, you can learn more about the limited one-to-one nutrition coaching spots I offer. All right, back to the episode. We've been talking I feel like all of this conversation we've had very much has danced around nutrition. I mean, nutrition is so integrated into all of these different themes and issues that we've been talking about because, what leads in part to injury and burnout and all these different things is it's when you aren't fueling what you're doing and when you're not nourishing yourself properly, when you're not caring for yourself, whether that's also are you sleeping? Are you managing stress to the best of your abilities? What else are you doing to care for yourself? Because it's a lot easier for many people to just put all of their effort into the training piece and then not to really do the rest. I know you work largely with recreational athletes, as do I, and there's so much going on in life. We're pulled in so many different directions, work and family and just adulting, which is so hard. So it's really easy to kind of just be like, okay, cool, I'm doing that. And now I have to move on. And oh gosh, I can't do all the things. So it's really important to have that kind of downtime, especially if you do have big events that you're doing, because not everyone trains for events, right? Some people are just kind of active all the time or whatever. So yeah, so I think these are all such important things to explore. And again, if anyone listening kind of wants to do a little exercise to just evaluate, do a little self-test and kind of ask yourself, how do I identify myself? If I had to, who is, was it John Levitt, of course, who is Claire? That's how the question you always ask when you go on his podcast, right? But it really is, kind of interesting to think about, well, who are you? How would you identify yourself? How would you introduce yourself? What are the many different facets, parts of you and what do you enjoy? And kind of just even jotting those things down. If you couldn't exercise, what would you want to do with yourself? And I always tell people to have these kinds of tools in their back pocket to kind of whip out when needed. So yeah, I don't know. This is, right now we're recording right before Thanksgiving. So kind of right at the start of off season for many people, or many people have entered or about to enter. But again, when this comes out, it's going to be the new year and people are going to be really gung ho to kind of get back into all the things. And I just, I want to tell people use some caution, really don't move too fast. As we said earlier, kind of small sustainable change, not necessarily these big extreme goals is often the way to do it, to stick with it. I actually want to talk about some of your kind of daily nutrition now and recent races and that kind of stuff. So you are not on Adderall anymore, I take it.
Yep,
yeah.
correct.
So
7 years.
so it sounds like food is something that you very much enjoy and you have a healthy relationship with food now. Yeah. What are the types of things you enjoy eating on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So I, from a standpoint of where usually it depends on where I'm at in the training cycle. So right now, obviously I'm in the off season. So it's a little less too. So I'll kind of give maybe a little bit of a contrast example if I'm high peak training versus kind of where I'm at right now in the off season. So, I mean, a rule for me all the time, no matter what, is if I feel like I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. That is the baseline rule.
I love that rule.
Yeah, the baseline rule for me, because that just means that my body needs it and I'm going to give it to that. So all that being said, that is the only really rule that I have. Actually, I have a few other rules. My other rule is eat before every run. That's always my rule 100%. I don't do fasted workouts at all. I think you are doing the service if you do that. I think you're risking injury, you're risking decreased performance. So even if it's an hour recovery run, today I just did hour recovery run, super easy, nothing to it. I ate right before that, I ate a cup of oatmeal, which is, 50 grams of 50 grams of carbs, 300 calories. Who the hell cares? Like, I felt great in the run. I felt good after. I'm feeling great throughout the day. Like, that is awesome. So that's my only other rule. And then, well, actually, one other rule on top of that too is after each run, I make sure to get in carbohydrates and protein after every single run. Like, that is also non-negotiable. So those are my 3 non-negotiables.
I support those 3 rules.
Yeah. So like, those are the only rules I really live by on a day-to-day basis. Now, for me, I try to just from a standpoint, like I just find like mentally for me that usually throughout the work days, Monday through Friday, unless it's at night, but like usually before I'm going to bed, I try to stay away from like any like ultra processed kind of like sugary kind of stuff. So I'll usually eat like a lot more like whole foods or blueberries. Like, so for example, like I'll give you an example today. So today I woke up, I had about a cup of blueberries and I just had a protein bar. I worked for a little bit. And then right before I had a cup of oatmeal and then went out for my run. And then right after the run, I had a cup of white rice. I had some more blueberries and I had 4 eggs. So pretty straightforward and simple. Like usually like usually eggs are kind of like my go-to for post. I'll switch up between like rice, potato. If I have like bagels, I'll have that too. So some sort of a carb. Oatmeal is usually a staple. I'll have that pretty much every day, either before or after, depending on it. Sometimes even before a run, like if I have nothing else, like I'll just take a gel or a couple gels right before. Like especially if it's a hard workout or something where I need that really fast glycogen. That's what I put into there too. And then usually for lunch, my amazing wife will cook me lunch usually. So usually it'll be like some sort of a protein, some sort of carb, and then some veggies. So like today we actually had street tacos. So we had 2 street tacos with steak and cilantro and onion. It was great. It was awesome, delicious. And then dinner is very much standard the same way. Usually a protein, a carb, and a vegetable, usually at dinner time. And then, you know, if we have a dessert, like, or, you know, maybe if we're going out to eat or something, like I'll usually have that. And then that's kind of like my standard throughout the week as well. Now in general, like when it's a high volume period, I just do that, but just at a higher volume of food. Like, I mean, just and I'll be snacking a lot more throughout the day because usually I'll be more hungry. So I'll either do like bigger portions. Like if I know I'm going to be on like back-to-back calls all day with clients, I'll just tend to eat like much bigger portions. So I just make sure that I'm getting that in. Or what I even just found, so this is like a really good hack that I tell athletes to do if they're in a position where, you know, maybe they're on calls all day and they're like, I can't get in the carbs or like whatever. Like I will literally drink like a carb drink or like I usually
juice.
Juice is that was actually a good one. Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, so I'll do like a carb drink.
I love
anything.
Juice.
Yeah, juice is awesome. I need to start incorporating that a lot more. But I'll do that. Or like I will just make sure to have like a thing that's, you know, easy to drink.
This is where smoothies, drinkable yogurts, juice, chocolate milk, like all that stuff's great because you can always drink stuff on calls usually.
100%.
Yeah.
So I always just make sure that it's just higher volume of food when I have that. And then on the weekends, like usually I'm just a little bit more lax, like in terms of just like, you know, if we're going to go out to eat and there's like this awesome, like, you know, loaded pizza that looks awesome, like I will have that and everything. And not to say that I just like do it on the weekends more. I just, for me personally, it's not necessarily like I think those foods are bad during the weekday. I just know like for me, like if I house like a really greasy or something food, like I'm mentally just going to feel a little bit more drained just personally. And so like for me, it's more of a standpoint of like, oh, okay, like I'm not restricting myself, but it's like, oh, okay, I just want to feel good throughout the day. And it's not as like a reward on the weekend or anything. It's just more from a standpoint of, I just know my body reacts better certain ways. I want to show up in this and this is how it works for me. I'm not restricting myself because listen, like my wife comes home for the pizza for lunch or something, like I'll probably eat it. Like, why not? Like, but like from a standpoint of, okay, this is where I make the choices. And I think it's almost hard to kind of explain it because it sounds like I'm restricting it, but like not really. Like I will give myself the option and I will do it occasionally. And on the weekends, it's not a rule that it's like, oh, I can only have bad foods on the weekends.
Sure.
It's just more of like, oh, like I'm not working.
It's not like this is my cheat meal and this is my,
it's not a reward. It's just more of a standpoint of like, oh, I can take a nap. Like I can afford to just sit on the couch and just rot away and just whatever. Right. So that's like my kind of thing on the weekends. And then if there is a long run, I always carb load the night before. Like I'll usually have something very, very carb rich, whether it's pizza, pasta, anything like that. And then during the runs, so my rule of thumb all the time is I always bring a gel with me on every single run.
Just in case. Yeah.
Just in case.
My husband does that.
Yes, it's an emergency gel and it works.
I love that.
Yeah, because there's sometimes I'll run out there and again, what's my rule? If you're hungry, eat. I'll run out there and I'm hungry and I'm like, oh God, like let me just take this gel and I'll take it. But barring that hunger is out there, my rule of thumb, and I always give this to athletes, if you're out there for 90 minutes or more, you got to be fueling on that run. So
Oh, yeah.
that is my hard rule on that too. And then it depends on what I'm training for. Like if I'm training for 100 miles or below, I'll tend to do anywhere between like 100 to 120 grams of carbs an hour. If I'm training for something
that's
like
high.
it is high. I've found
That's very high.
Yeah, and I know we talked about the high carb and is it for everyone and everything. I gave it an experimentation try last year at Javelina, and I ended up running like my best 100 miler and trained well, recovered well. Like, so I responded like pretty well to it. So I found that like that 100 to 120 works well for me in those distances. When I get to 200 miles and above, I tend to bring it down to more 70 to 80 grams just because it's such a lower intensity. But I make sure to be diligent with that. I'm really weird in the sense, and I don't recommend people doing this or try to be this, but like I can do gels for like an entire 200-mile race. So Tahoe 200, besides aid stations at Tahoe 200, besides the aid stations, all I did was gels like the entire time. Yeah. So I have no problem with it. I can just throw it down.
What gel are you doing?
I do a combo of a few. Yeah. So Precision is usually like my main go-to for caffeine gels and regular gels. I also do Never Second, Morton, and then I'll cycle in and out between SIS Beta Fuel as well too. Usually I like to do those in the night because they don't have as much sodium. So like I don't need as much sodium in the nighttime. So those 4 I cycle through all the time. And then I'll supplement with either like Never Second drink mix, or I like Nax drink mix for like longer stuff because it's got some protein. And I've just felt, I know it's like evidence is kind of mixed about intra-workout kind of protein supplementation, but I've just found that it does help me to have a little bit less muscle.
Yeah.
Again,
well, especially if you're not eating as much food. So a lot of people get their protein through food, but if you're not really doing that so much and you're kind of just nibbling on other stuff, then that probably is really helpful. Other people do recovery mix sometimes. Yeah, I mean, this stuff is so individual and, with all the stuff. And I kind of want to revisit for a second. You were saying how you tend not to do like the ultra processed sugary stuff during the day. And I'm curious, does that not make you feel physically good, or mentally you're saying something about kind of mentally you don't feel as good, or what is kind of or do you just not want it, or like what is your reasoning for kind of putting that in place for yourself?
Yeah. So from a standpoint of me, and like the way that I look at it too is like when I'm on a call with an athlete or I'm on this podcast or anything too, like I want to make sure that like I'm mentally sharp, like I'm here, like I'm feeling like full energy and everything. Because I just know for me that the more energy that I can feel, like the better I can show up for someone, listen to someone, add value on this podcast, right? And so like for me, I've just found that I just feel like a little, like I feel like I do get a little bit more of that like sugar high and then crash, and then I get a little bit more exhausted. And so for me, I just kind of want to avoid that for the time being because I want to show up for my clients. I want to show up for you. I want to show up for everybody listening here. And I just feel like I just do that best whenever I avoid really sugary or really greasy stuff like throughout the day. Now I'll eat a lot of fruit. Like don't get me wrong, like fructose is totally fine. Doesn't bother me as much, but like I'm talking like, loads of processed sugar or like candy or anything like that too. I try to stay away from during the day just because I am more prone to just energy spikes on that too. And, from a biological standpoint, that could just be because I do have ADHD and just my dopamine receptors are a little bit more fried than the average person. Again, it's not an excuse, which by the way, before the other thing, all my ADHD brethren and sisterin out there too, don't just have excuses for bad habits in your life because you have ADHD. I'm like, I have ADHD, so I forgot. Like, no, just be better at remembering. That's what I tell myself. So all that being said, from that standpoint though, like because I know that there's that, and at least I feel that more physically than others, like that's that. And that's a trade-off I'm willing to make. Like, it's not like I'm in a position where I'm like restricting myself. It's like, oh, you need this to perform better. It's like, no, I feel better. And that's a choice that I want to make. I'm not cutting it off. Like if I have a Wednesday that's like super clear and open and I've had my work done, which like hasn't been the case for like 2 years, like, but all that being said, if that was ever a case, like I'll eat something on that day. So that's more my optimization.
And the reason I wanted to clarify that too is because I often talk to people about the most important thing, like at the end of the day, it is kind of this whole N of one thing, right? Like, yes, we have all this research out there floating around about these things are health promoting. These maybe we don't want to eat quite so much of. And I mentioned, sugar in athletes, and that's a little bit more nuanced and complex and dependent on the situation. But really at the end of the day, like, your body best and what feels good. Now, of course, that might, sometimes there's complicating factors like, maybe you don't feel good because you're under fueling. That's like a whole separate story, right? But like, if you eat something and it doesn't feel good to you, then that's fine. I've said this on the podcast many times before. The most important thing is if it is like, if you don't eat dairy, okay, well, how else can we get kind of calcium and protein and vitamin D and some other things, right? So it's like, okay, cool. You don't need to eat dairy. That's not a big deal. It's more like, well, what else can we get to make sure you're not missing out on any nutrients, right? So I think it's really important just to kind of check in with yourself and your body and why you eat things and why you don't, and to be mindful of certain things. Cause I know for myself, like I love sweets. I don't limit them at all. But I also know that if I eat too much, I feel kind of sick. So it's like what's changed for me over the years, and it's been really interesting, is like last night, like I have ice cream all the time, but I find that like I'll have like a very small scoop and that's enough for me. And if I eat too much more than that, I might not sleep well, or it doesn't feel so good or whatever. And it's so again, it's just like experimenting with yourself and figuring out what feels good, and that will change at different times, and you might be willing to feel crappy because you just really want the thing. And so I think this is all just this is why I love having these conversations, because it's just showing how at the end of the day we all eat very differently for different reasons, and it also changes, right? So I want to go back to some race nutrition stuff. Actually, funny enough, I was looking at kind of your ultra sign up and where you've been at the last couple of years, and so we were both at Canyons 2023. That was my last 50K. It was hot as hell.
Yeah, it was so hot. That was my worst race ever.
You did the 100K, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was hot. And
I was watching you all come in, because I did the 50K and I was like watching you guys come in, and it was like brutal. I had a friend who ran 100K.
Yeah, the 100 miles were getting wrecked. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, but I had a friend who did the 100K, and it was really brutal because of how spaced out the aid stations were, and my husband ran out of water, and it was just a bad scene. But I did have a fun race. And then we were both at Mammoth last year.
Oh, sick. Oh my gosh.
I was there just by coincidence for my birthday, and then and then on my actual birthday, I ran into Sally McRae and Tim, because she was on day one of that huge effort, but no one knew what was going on. I was like, oh, there's like no one on the DBA trail, and like suddenly I was like, oh, Tim and Sally, cool, hi. Wow, and then I was like, I really want to do the DBA, but it's full. Tim was like, oh, good thing you ran into me, you can get in. And so I hopped into that, and it was so much fun.
Oh, it's awesome. What a cool experience. Yeah.
Anyways, just random tidbit of information. I didn't see you there, but we were both there. But you've done all kinds of stuff. It seems like you've been gravitating more towards these longer distances. And do you have like a favorite distance, or is there one that you find like fits your personality and athletic capabilities the best, or you kind of enjoy all of these different distances that you do?
It's so interesting, because I'm actually going through a lot of this reflection period right now. And, if you asked me last year, I would have said the 200-mile distance was my favorite. And I did Cocodona, which was my first one last year, and I loved it. I mean, like, it was amazing. Like, and I knew it because when I did my first 100-miler, I had the very common experience of a first 100 where it's like you do it, and then like right after you're like, I'm never doing that again. Like, I literally remember being in the car and I was like, this is too long for me. I'm never going to do that again. Like, what the heck? And what was really interesting, I did Cocodona, which is nearly like, it's more than double as long as a 100-miler, 250 miles. And the next day I woke up and I was like, I need to do that again. And that's when I was like, oh wow, I really love it. For me, like the 200-mile distance is so beautiful because, they say that you go for a lifetime in 100 miles. Like, I think you go through like centuries in a 250 mile. Like, I mean, it is so awesome. I think like the amount of emphasis it has on like mindset, logistical planning, like more of the stuff outside of athletics, like making it such a big multi-variable race, like that just excites me so much. Plus, like to go like over 200 miles on your feet is just such a cool experience. And the being out there for multiple days, like going through the nights, like experiencing sleep deprivation, like all that just seems so fun to me, just the puzzle of it all. I think where I've kind of landed on this is like, what's my favorite distance? I think it just depends on like what I'm excited about in the moment. Like, back to identities, like I don't want to be known as like the 200 guy. Like I don't want to be known as like the fast 100 guy. Like, and I think it's a disservice for athletes to put themselves in a box like that. Yes, it might be your strengths. Yes, you might like that, but like you might be preventing yourself from doing something that you might find that you enjoy a lot better. As a coach, honestly, like my priority as an athlete has shifted. Like when I first started to really climb, like in terms of what I was doing and stuff, I wanted to be the best athlete I could be. Now I really want to be the best coach I can be. And so for me, I'm always thinking about how can I find races that can give me new experiences that can teach athletes who are doing this too. So like you'll see on there, I did URA 100. If I wasn't a coach, I would never do that race. Like that's just me personally. Awesome race. Great people, amazing stuff. But like high altitude mountain races with 40,000 feet a gain, 100 miles, not my cup of tea. But I did it because I was like, I want to speak to this experience in case someone signs up for a race. So more of my kind of desire has been around like, what am I excited to train for? And like, how can I be a better coach? And that's how I align what I choose next.
I want to know, because I get this all the time. My clients are always asking me this when we talk through it. When you are doing these really long races, and let's take like 100-mile, for instance, or even 100K, when it comes to nutrition planning and practicing your nutrition in training, and you just never get the opportunity to go as long, so it's always this big question mark about, or maybe like it's practicing like, there's no aid station set up. And yes, you can do kind of practice races and stuff like that. But maybe the longest you're running is 50 miles for a 100-mile. And I'm curious how you speak to your athletes about kind of that challenge.
Yeah,
just
100%.
Not being able to practice exactly what you're doing in that race time.
And it is the hardest thing. And I always tell athletes, like, there is a risk that we're going to learn something new that we just simply cannot find out in training. Like, that is just the reality of it, right? And it's the reality of not just nutrition. It's the reality of how your body holds up. It's the reality of how do your feet blister, like, at certain points. Like, there are going to be a lot of unknowns. However, just like any experimentation, you can make best guesses and inferences with the most similar long runs that are going to be as, like, close as we can get in training to it. So, obviously, like, once you get into 100 miles and 200 miles, like, you're not going to get anywhere close to that distance. Like, usually for 100 miles, and this depends on athlete to athlete, again, just like nutrition, like training, ultra training is very, very specific to, yes, there's best principles and stuff, but like the biggest thing that's the most specific, I think, is how long the longest run is. That's the most common question I get as a running coach all the time. What should my longest long run be? That is the most independent, like that is almost, I think, unanimous with like, what should I be eating for lunch today? Like that is, I mean, it is so widely dependent on any single athlete. But I will say, generally, we look at those athletes' longest runs. And those are the times where I say, okay, this is going to be the time where we do the dress rehearsal for nutrition. And any long run that we've done, assuming that we haven't had a plan that's dialed in yet, like if they have a plan that works for them and maybe they've done 100 miles before, or maybe they've done 50 miles before, right? They've done 50 and they're like, okay, let's keep this plan. But let's just think about other like alternative options in case it goes south, right? So I'm always a fan of nutrition with race, sports nutrition. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So don't try to like toggle things, don't try. But if you go further, you're going to have to plan. So the best way is like look at your long runs and do what you can in that time period, which usually can be anywhere between, I usually the longest long run I'll kind of cap someone at is maybe doing a 50-mile race, but a training run, like maybe a 50K if it's absolutely necessary. And that's a maybe. But all that being said, like those are usually good indicators. So it's like, okay, what did we learn from this? Did this work out well? Did this work great? Like, was there a certain point where you start to feel sick? Maybe we switch things around there. So we have our knowns. Now, for the unknowns, I always tell athletes to hedge their bets in a few different ways. The first way is try to get as many things in your training in terms of on your list of things that you can eat. And so what I mean by that is like you might take, a certain gel like Never Second for a while. I'm not, I'm just picking this as an example. There's no bad. I love Never Second, but you might be taking Never Second and then maybe at mile 60, the distance that we never ran before, you're sick of it, but you really like SIS beta fuel. So it's like, but now that it's like, oh, I've done beta fuel before and it works for me. So I can start to take that and pivot. So if you have a bigger options of things you can choose for, and we want to avoid as much as possible the nothing new on race day, which I don't think should be 100% absolute rule, by the way. But from that standpoint, like we want to try to get things that are as familiar as possible and have those alternative options because you don't know what you're going to like at a certain point. You don't know what your stomach's going to respond better to. That's why I always suggest athletes have a liquid calorie option and a real food option and a salty option and basically having all these options, because then at that point you can pick. If everything goes out the window and you need to eat something out there, find something that's at least adjacently similar. So like maybe you can do mashed potatoes, but they don't have mashed potatoes out there, and you haven't tried potato chips, but that's the only thing that they have. Like go for the potato chips. It's adjacent. That's why I say like nothing new on race day. Yes, if you want to try to fill up your nutritional arsenal as much as you can and not follow that. But if you need to eat, like if it's between eating something you've never eaten before and not eating at all, please eat something and try to make something adjacently tangented. And so like the more that you can like accumulate these things in your training, in your long runs and everything, the more you're going to have a list to hedge your bets. Now, the biggest thing I always say, it's a science experiment. So meaning if you go out on a long run, like you might listen to this and like, okay, great, I'm going to go to the feed and order all this stuff and like try a million things. Like, no, don't do that. Like if you're on a long run, only change one thing. Because it's a variable. It's a multivariable. You try all this other stuff and your stomach's jacked up. You don't know if it was Krispy Kreme donut or if it was the Nerds gummy clusters, right? But if you just switch the Nerd gummy clusters, you know that like my stomach doesn't go well with that, right? So like this is the process we go to. And I always tell athletes that, hey, like if you get GI issues like mile 70 into a run, like that is good data for us. And it's good data for us if we haven't been there before. Now, if we've done 100 miles and you've got GI issues at 70, we need to diagnose why that is and try to avoid it for the next 100 miler and also our next race races, but there's always going to be this level of unknown. And the more that you can strategize beforehand, how do we hedge our bets so that we can avoid the issues as much as possible? It's great. But also having that levity to be like, okay, there can be a potential that things can happen just because we have zero way of telling until we actually do the thing.
Yeah. And that's usually where I get people where they're like, I have done X number of races and I always throw up at blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yes, welcome. Let's work on it.
Yeah, exactly.
I usually get people when they're like, every time I do a race, so I have a whole, I have a group of these people right now, a bunch of runners who are having GI issues at a certain point. Okay. My last question is any fun nutrition related stories, whether they're good or bad, from your racing history that you think my audience might enjoy?
Yeah, so I have, this one was very classically unhinged for me. So I raced Javelina. So I've done Javelina 103 times, and this was the second year that I was doing it. The first year I did it, it was my best race at the time. I way outperformed where I could, thought I could be. And it was just a very, emotionally, important event for me. And so I was so excited because I wanted to go back next year and do better. Now, sometimes with life, things don't happen linearly. Success is not linear. I actually did worse that year for various different reasons. And the third year, to complete the story, I actually did better than I ever done before. So success is not linear, but to go back to that race. So usually, like I mentioned before, especially for a race like Javelina, where it's so hot, I tend to really hark on gels and liquid calories just because it's so hot. And if I have real food out there in the daytime, it will upset my stomach. Now, at this point though, my race was already it was already just going sideways. I had one more loop left. I had 20 miles left, and I just didn't want to eat gels at that point. I was like, you know what? I'm done. Why even bother? And so someone on my crew had a whole pizza, and he's like, do you want this pizza? And I was like, yeah, I want that pizza. I was like, but I gotta go. And so he takes the pizza, opens up my naked belt, and proceeds to shove the entire pizza all in this running belt. So literally
the entire pizza?
Yeah, the entire pizza. So literally,
was it a personal pizza?
It was a little bigger than a personal pizza, not a big large one, but
how do you fit a whole pizza in your belt?
Well, those naked belts are amazing. They fit a lot. And so literally I have this big bulging belt with cheese coming out the side. It was
gross.
I had to throw it away after. But I went through that whole loop and I fielded the whole pizza with a naked belt. And I'll never forget, I was running past someone and I pulled out this just crushed slice of pizza and everything. And someone's like, dude, are you just have a pizza in your running belt? And I was like, damn straight, dude. It's one of those days. And yeah, that running belt got thrown out right after, but that was that was insane. Yeah. So I always think about that. And I always think about Dean Karnassus from
I was about to say that you're Dean Karnassus, ordering a pizza. Yeah. That's exactly what I thought about.
I was like, man, if Dean had a naked belt, he would have made his life so much easier.
There you go. There you go. Oh my goodness. That's a great story. Awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Okay, well, I'm going to wrap things up with my quick bites questions. What is your favorite post-race meal or snack?
Ooh, well, coincidentally enough, it's pizza for sure. Pizza's my favorite pre-race, the night before, and it's my favorite post-race too.
What toppings do you get?
So I will tell you this, and my wife always knocks me for this. So I'm from New York, and we take our pizza very seriously. In New York, we're just straight cheese, and we call it plain in New York too. So when someone says plain pizza, what the hell?
Plain.
What's plain pizza? Yeah, I'm like, no, we're cheese pizza on there. I'm not a toppings guy.
I lived in New York City for 15 years.
So you know, exactly.
What part of New York are you from?
So I'm from Westchester County, so 1 hour north from the city, in a town where everybody who wants to work in the city but doesn't want to live in the city.
Got it. Okay. And what do you think your worst race nutrition experience was?
Oh,
do you have one you can pinpoint?
Yeah, probably my worst race nutrition was my first 100 miler.
The Cliff Blocks.
So actually, the Cliff Blocks was my first 50K, which that's right. It worked well, but I just can't eat them again. But oh my God, during my first 100 miler, I had no idea what I was doing. I was feeling mostly on Cliff bars.
Ooh,
and
yikes.
Oh God, and it was hot, and so if anyone ever tried to eat their 20th Cliff bar in a day when it's super hot, I mean, you're like a camel, just it's just disgusting. And then I was drinking zero sugar energy drinks, which I think the erythritol just wrecked my stomach.
Oh,
and so I was having that and basically did not eat for 20 miles. So I was just having all the wrong stuff. And that's when I realized, even for me, and this is a good N=1 thing, I realized that real food doesn't work for me in 100 miles. So I actually, for 100 miles, besides that one bad race at Javelina, I actually don't eat real food for 100 miles. And that's just me personally. I do better with more easily digestible stuff because I have a little bit more sensitive to the real food at higher intensities.
But you're also moving pretty fast, right? You're a faster runner.
Yeah,
what is your pace for at 100?
Yeah. So that's the thing I always tell people. Like, so I do, like I said before, I do 100 to 120 grams of carbs, but that is not for everybody. And not to say like it's an elitist thing or anything. It's just more, when you run at a faster pace, your body's going to burn more. And then I also think, I have to get this exactly measured. I would assume I probably have a higher carb oxidation than a lot more people. So I also think that I burn through glycogen a lot quicker. And again, that doesn't mean I'm better or worse on anything. It's just a matter of biology. But from that standpoint, like, so for Hobbling 100 I ran 15:28, so it was like an average pace of like 9:15 for 100 miles.
Yeah, that's fast.
That's pretty quick. Yeah, like that's pretty quick. Like for context, like a 24-hour 100 miler, for those who know, which is like usually like, if you ran like sub 24, and it depends on the course, it's like 14:24. So I'll usually run like relatively faster out there.
That's something to keep in mind, that whether or not you are eating real foods or relying more on kind of the simple sugars, like also, depends on kind of your intensity.
And by the way, that doesn't mean you're worse or anything. Like
no, of course not.
Yeah. Like I think everybody, if you're just lining up on that race, whether it's for a 5K or a 200 miler, like you are amazing and you're doing hard things, and celebrate that. Don't compare yourself to others.
Cosign. What is the most exotic or interesting food you've ever tried?
Ooh, most exotic or interesting food I've ever tried? Oh man, I'm trying to think. I guess it's not really like super, well, maybe, all right. So exciting food. I'll go with that, because I think that's probably like the coolest thing. So one of the things like me and my wife have done over the past couple of years, go to like some Michelin star restaurants. And we went to this one like 2-star Michelin restaurant outside of Venice in Italy, right after I did a race in Croatia. And it was insane. I mean, it was like 14-course meal, and we were there for 4 hours. And it was so interesting, like some of the foods that were there. And we were in like the heart of Italy. I mean, like it was outside of Venice. So like small town, like people barely spoke English. So it was hard to understand like what things were. But the one thing that was very interesting to this day that has always stuck with me, because I don't like oysters in general, but they had an oyster ice cream. So it was oyster flavored ice cream, and they served it in an oyster shell. And I don't like oysters, but it was delicious. It was amazing. And so,
that sounds gross.
Yeah, it sounded like when I said it, I was like, I don't know about this one. And I tried it and it was awesome. Everything there was like insane. And it was like a 4-hour dinner saga. It was nuts.
That's so, wait, that's interesting that you did it right after a big race, because my husband and I, I think it was like a day or two after we ran the New York City Marathon, went to Per Se, and like it was our big splurge, sick. Like, but for both our birthdays, like we did like combined all the celebrations and splurge on this meal. I felt so sick, because like it's also like after you do a race and race really, because I was racing really hard on that race, and it's just like eating that much food, and it's so rich, and it was really hard to eat everything, but you don't want to like leave anything over because it's so delicious. So yeah, I feel like I can't eat like that anymore. I don't know. It was fun though.
Yeah, I think like for that day, because like I knew I wanted to eat a lot, like, and not to be like restrictive and stuff, but I was like, I need to save room for this. So I had like more lighter stuff and everything. So by the time I was there, I was ravenous, and I was like, but it was so good. I mean, it was, but it's true. Like the fancy dinners, usually smaller portion size, and you pay a lot more. So I always think that's like the most ironic thing ever.
Yeah. What are your comfort foods?
So this is going to be so weird, because I bet I'm probably the only person on the planet that says this. My comfort foods is, have you ever like had those like perfect bars? You know what I'm talking about? Like they're like refrigerated.
That's your comfort food?
Yeah, I love those things. So like my wife would get them at Costco, and I will mow down a box of like 20 in maybe like 4 days. Yeah. For some reason, I'm addicted to them. I don't know what it is. Like,
you just said you're addicted to something.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Got you.
Exposed. Those I actually might be addicted to. But all that being said, like they're, for some reason, they're so good. They always like leave me like feeling good after, like satiated. And
I tried one once and I just didn't like the taste of it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely acquired. But that's why I say like I'm probably the only person.
You are the only one. I can say that.
I know. I don't work for a perfect bar, and I don't have like equity in them or anything.
You didn't get them to sponsor your show. What is your favorite beverage?
Ooh, favorite beverage? I'm gonna go with coffee. Like I love coffee. Big coffee guy. I drink about 1,000 milligrams of caffeine a day. I don't recommend that for people.
What?
Yeah,
that's a lot.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Wow.
It's a ton. But I am a big proponent of caffeine, especially during racing, and I think people underutilize caffeine so much. And on a day-to-day basis, like, yeah, I mean, I drink a lot. I drink a ton. Like, I would, I think I just like the way it feels. I have a high tolerance to it. So, but all that being said, like, I'm just I think caffeine is just, I think for lack of
that doesn't make you jittery or have any negative side effects, because that's a really big dose of caffeine.
It is. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't. My inference, and I don't know if this is actually true, but I would just probably guess, is because I used to take Adderall for so long. Like I think that I don't want to say it almost acts like a substitute, because I've gone like days with like doing 200 milligrams to be totally fine. And like, honest, I'm not like the part where I get like freaked out if I don't have it. But I do think that like my brain is just used to just having that increased dopamine, increased adenosine blocking, like all the things that caffeine does. Like it's like Adderall does that in like a more extreme kind of form, in a different kind of form. So I do think that there's probably a similar thing onto it. And again, it's like, oh man, do you replace that addiction with another? It's like, no, like I can go a Saturday without coffee. I have done days without caffeine. I don't need it. Like there's like, if I go into a meeting, I'm not going to freak out if I don't have coffee. Like I'll muster it up. I'll figure it out. It's fine. But I just like to have it.
Totally. How do you like your eggs cooked if you eat eggs?
Oh, I'm a scrambled eggs guy, which is again very controversial. But I like a good scrambled eggs with cheese. I mean, when done right, I mean it is the best. I am not a big fan of Sunnyside because I like the yolk and I just think it gets everywhere. And I'm like, oh man, like I'm trying to eat this thing and it's like a liquid. Like
gotta lick the plate or get some bread.
This does not work out well. Yeah, so I'm a scrambled guy through and through.
Okay. And last question: what are the top 3 items of gear that are most essential to your active lifestyle?
Oh, gear. So top 3 gear that's like most essential. So I think the first thing, bar none, is going to be a nice soft flask water bottle. So I am a big proponent that even if it's a recovery run, take a freaking water bottle with you. Like I don't care if it's cold outside or anything. Like hydration is one of the biggest reasons, not only why I think people like DNF races and things, but like, man, like if you're just dehydrated, like people are like, oh, I feel like crap. Like I ate all this stuff. I'm like, well, how much water have you drank? Like, I mean, just like it is so important for our body to have water out there. So I always take a Hydro Pack soft flask. I know like some people are like, why are you taking a bottle? It's only an hour run. And I'm like, why aren't you? So Hydro Pack soft flask bottle. I think another piece of gear that is essential. I do like running with a watch. I tend to tell people who are a little bit more like stressed about like numbers and metrics not to look at the watch. But even so, like there's some days for me where I'm like, oh God, like pace is a little freaking me out today. So like, let me change it. But I just like it because, you know, you're able to like make note of how much time you're out there. And I think like as a coach, it's so important. Like if you want to optimize performance to track your data, like 100%. And so like for me, like I think that having a watch is super, super essential. And then the third thing is I think it's having a pair of shoes that you are excited to wear. Like don't just buy a pair of shoes because it looks cool. You're always doing it. Like you got like, I love a good pair of shoes where you're like, oh man, I can't wait to take you out for a spin today. It's like that car that you have in the garage right now.
So what's your shoe? What shoe do you wear? What's that for you?
So recently, I've gotten so stoked on them because they're just so awesome. Is the Mountain Coast H1s?
My husband's a huge fan of those. He won't shut up about it.
They're amazing. Yeah, I mean, and shout out to Mountain Coast because they kind of came out of nowhere and now they're like, I got a pair of those and they're so awesome because I live in Phoenix and there's like trails like about 2 miles out, and I like to run in them, but usually like they're a little rocky. Like Phoenix trails are pretty technical, so I would have to wear a road shoe out there, or sorry, a trail shoe. And it's usually a little uncomfortable in those road sections, or I'd wear a road shoe and then risk like, you know, twisting my ankle or something on the trail. But this shoe is like so perfect because like literally it is comfy on the roads and it's comfy on the trails. And I'm like, how did they like do this? Because usually if it's a hybrid shoe, it's either skewed one way or the other, but they've done such a great job of figuring out one that's like an actual true hybrid shoe. And so I'm obsessed. So like I have to try the R1s, which are the road shoes, and the T1s. If I do Badwater, I mean, if I like the R1s, if it's anything like the H1 but better on road, like I will probably wear the R1s. But I've been super stoked. I've only worn those shoes for runs on the past 2 weeks. It's the only, and usually I rotate out pretty quickly, but I've just loved those so much. I've just been hammering in those for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Joe, for spending time with me today. And where can everyone find you if they want to give your show a listen or work with you as a coach or give you a follow?
Oh, well, thank you so much. And by the way, anyone here, if you are looking for like someone to work with to help you to dial in your nutrition, like Claire is the person. Like we've had on tons of people like speaking about nutrition, diet, like all this kind of stuff on our podcast. And I was just totally impressed by our conversation. So if you're listening right now, you're looking for someone to help you dial in. She didn't tell me to say that. Like, I'm not going to pay to do that.
I appreciate that.
But please go work with Claire. Anyways, for us, Everyday Ultra Podcast, if you're into a podcast that helps you to endure better and be a better endurance athlete every day, you can find us on any platform, including the one you're listening to right now. I'm on social at Joe Corcione. I'm trying to post a lot more social content with actionable tips and advice to help you be better ultra runners. Yeah, I mean, those are the main. And then we're also on YouTube. So our YouTube channel is very small but growing. And but we put a lot of cool content on there. Yeah, it's a tough game for sure, YouTube. But we have a YouTube channel also under Everyday Ultra as well. Our goal is just to help people be better endurance athletes. And so if that's that's you and you want a lot of free content, we give away a lot of free content that people tell us that we should be charging for. But I'm like, listen, like, yeah, sure. Like we have stuff you can pay for, but at reality, we don't think this information should be gatekept. So that's our philosophy.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. It was great to have you on.
Appreciate it so much.
All right, that's our show for today. If you are enjoying this podcast, I would love it if you shared it with a friend or on social media, and if you left a 5-star rating and review. And of course, hit follow or subscribe so you do not miss another episode. If you'd like to support my free content, you can check out my affiliate codes and stickers on the shop page of eatforendurance.com. You can visit my Patreon page. Both are linked in the show notes. If you've already grabbed some of my free resources and want more consistent support, consider joining my membership Fuel for Life crew on my website, eatforendurance.com. It is just $39 a month. I promise you won't regret it. And if you do, you know what? It's like basically the cost of a nice dinner, and you can cancel after a month. Although I don't think you will. Thank you guys so much for listening. I will see you all next time.